YouTube, this is fluo'van, and what I'm going to show you today is how to print multiple prints on one print bed with different printer settings for each model. This is kind of a neat feature that Cura 3.2.1 has included into their open source software to allow you to basically run tests to determine if you can change certain variables to improve printer time and not sacrifice quality. So let's just jump right in. I'm running a Mac OS system, so in order to bring back my printer setup screen, I'm just going to hit Command E, and that's going to slide my printer setup screen back over on the right side of the screen. Now I'm running a Monoprice Mini Delta that I'd recently just picked up, and I'll be doing a review on my thoughts about this printer in the future to come. So far, the thoughts have been really positive. I am running a PLA setup, and I've already gone in and set up some parameters within my printer setup so that I can get some of the print qualities that I'm after to see what this little printer can do. Now if I were to print these three skulls, it would basically print off of what those parameters are that I've already preset. But say I want to kind of run a test and I want to print this skull different than this skull and this skull different than that skull, then what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to select the model, and I'm going to come over here to the left side of the screen and go all the way down to this per model settings. And when I do that, I'm going to click settings, and when I do that, it's going to bring up a list, a selection list. Now these are the basic settings that you have populated on the right side of your screen. But if there are other variables that you want to change, then you can click Show All. That will bring up more options for you to change and give you the ability to really manipulate your prints. So I'm going to click Show All, but I'm not going to pick a lot of variables. I'm just kind of going to go down the line and change a few things here. So quality, within the quality, I'm not really going to change anything. I want to keep everything pretty much the same as I have it set up over here on the right side of my screen. Now for shell, I'm not really going to change anything either. I kind of want to keep everything the same there, so it's going to default to what I also have on the right side of my screen. The variables that I want to start changing are actually infill density and infill pattern. So let's change infill density. You notice when I click that, it actually populates on the left side of the screen in this little queue here. So this is just a selection screen. You can't change anything in here until you've closed out of this. So infill density, picking that. I'm gonna do infill pattern because I want to change the pattern from the grid to a cubic pattern, and I want to change the percentage of that infill. So those are two infill variables that I want to change. If you keep scrolling down, you're going to get to material flow. Keep that the same. You don't really want to change that. Speed, there's an interesting one. I want to actually change the speed. So you can change the print speed overall, and then you can actually individually change what segments of your print print at those different speeds. So I actually want to change the speed of the infill speed and the wall speed. Now you can even then break it down into how fast do you want the outer wall speed to print in relationship to the inner wall speed. Well, let's say I'll leave wall speed off and I'll just click outer wall speed and inner wall speed. So now we have three speed variables that have popped up on the left side of the screen. Scrolling down further, and you can see how many variables there are. There are a lot of variables you can really play around and manipulate in this software. It is a pretty amazing, powerful piece of equipment that is open source, and I thank you for that, Cura, because you can do a lot with this. So continuing down, I'm not going to change anything in terms of travel or cooling. I am going to add generate support because I do want to generate support, and I do want to change the support overhang angle. So we will add that to the list. Once I've done that, I'm going to close, and I'm going to come over here, and now I can change those variables. For my infill density, since we're going to leave the middle one kind of as the control, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the infill density on this one to 10%. We want to do a 10% infill. I do want to change the grid to cubic, so that will change the orientation of the infill inside of your model. My infill speed, I want it to print really fast. Now Monoprice advertises this printer to be able to print at 150 millimeters per second. Now, that's only true in a straight line test. It's not necessarily true in terms of if you're doing a curve, because you have to decelerate and accelerate in order to make those curves and not have essentially going off the rails. So even though it says 150 millimeters per second, it's questionable as to whether or not, and physically not possible for a print to do that throughout the entire printing process. So set that parameter as high as you can, and it'll print as fast as it can because of the mechanical limitations of your printer. Now for outer wall speed, I want to keep that the same because I want that quality of that outer wall to be pretty darn good. So I'm going to keep that at a much slower rate of speed. And then inner wall, I like the fact that it's a little bit faster, so I'm going to keep that as well. For this model, I am going to generate support, and in that support, I'm actually going to keep the angle at 50 for the control, but I'm going to change this angle to 70 so that that structural support only kicks in where there is a 70-degree overhang. So that's it. I've set the model parameters for this one to be different from this one. You're just going to click off of that and move on to the next model. So that model's staying the same. Let's change this model. Now, one of the things that you will have to do is select your settings again, your filters for each model. It'd be nice if there was a little bit of a setup in here where once you select one model, if you're trying to do a test, like if there was a test mode, then it keeps those variables the same, so you don't have to remember what all the variables were that you picked. So we didn't change anything in quality. We didn't change anything in shell. You can see there's actually quite a bit in terms of shell and what you can do. What we did add is we added infill density, infill pattern, so we want those, and then we're going to move on down the line. We're going to add infill speed, and we're going to add outer wall speed and inner wall speed. Then we're going to go down the line again, and we are actually going to add, look at all those support features. We're going to add the generate support and then the support overhang. So now we have those selected, we can close out of this and come over here and change those variables. So control was 20%, the last one we did was 10. Let's do 15 on infill density. And we're going to change this to cubic. This time infill speed, let's do 100. I am not sure what this printer will max out on in terms of printing infill, but it will be interesting to see if there is a noticeable difference in terms of changing that variable. Outer wall speed. Now, I actually want to see if I can increase the outer wall speed and still get a decent print quality. So I'm going to change that from 30 to 60 in terms of the outer wall speed. Inner wall speed, I'm going to jump it up to 80. And I'm going to generate support. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down here, and I think what I'll do is I will actually change that from being 50 degrees to 80. And this may completely botch this print. I don't know. It's for fun. It's figuring out what's going on. These are really small prints, so even the overhang with these prints, even if they're greater than 30 degrees, the moment arm of the material that's overhanging that that point that could potentially collapse is really small. So I don't really see it actually collapsing. Now, printing in the air is a possibility, but with the 80-degree overhang, it'll be fun. We'll just kind of figure it out. So once that's set, we're going to click off of that, and we're good. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to actually come over to this middle one, which is our control, and there's one variable in there that we need to change in order to make it the same as the rest and make a good control. And what that is that's actually our infill pattern. We don't want to have an infill pattern different than the rest of the others when what we're trying to do is gauge the other prints in relationship to that. So we're going to click show all. This may take a second to populate. All right, so now we have the show all button on. Let's take a look at adding that variable for the infill pattern, and we'll just put infill density over there so that we have a good control there to see. So select that, close, and change this to cubic. We are going to leave the infill at 20%, and we're done. And so once we're finished there, what we can do is go ahead and slice this and see how much time it's going to take. Now the time should drop down based off of the variables that we've changed. I think we started out with 2 hours and 37 minutes or so, and we should be able to have a faster print speed, but we will determine the quality of those prints upon review. Okay guys, I'm back after that session of slicing that just took place. Originally, I said that it was 2 hours and 37 minutes or so. I did take a look and it was 2 hours and 44 minutes. The new slicing time is 2 hours and 40 minutes. We didn't really save a lot of time in those variables that I changed, but we did create 3 different types of prints that we're now going to print on one build plate. So that's cool. I will continue to play around with how to manipulate those variables to get a faster print time, and may do a second follow-up video to show you what's the best way to improve your print time and still get the quality that you need. So jumping in, let's take a look. You can obviously see all 3 of these prints are different. We have our control in the center, where it's pretty much the same as my original settings, other than the infill is now cubic instead of grid, and then the one on the left has a slightly lower support structure with an infill of 10, and the one on the right has even a slightly lower structure support of 80 degrees, and the infill is actually 15%. So we've changed some variables here, and we can actually take a look at those infill patterns of the cubes and see how they do vary. So it will be interesting to see if the structural support of these models will maintain their quality with less infill and a decreased print time. It will be also interesting to see if the structures that are being supported in the control and also in the first experimental group are turned out with decent quality, essentially, on the third experimental group. Because if that's the case, then we can get rid of some of our structural support and still have a decent print. Alright YouTube, this pretty much wraps up this session of fluo'van, and if you like this video on how to change individual print parameters of a multi-print setup on one print bed, then go ahead and like the video down below, throw any comments or suggestions, and in the future I will probably do a video on how the print quality of these turned out and go over my thoughts and considerations for making adjustments in the future. Until next time, always take a bright, vivid position at the forefront of new ideas and keep it moving forward. Take it easy, YouTube.